The mansion stood on a hill overlooking the city, white stone glowing beneath the afternoon sun like a monument to power. Inside, the dining hall shimmered with quiet extravagance. Crystal chandeliers spilled light over a table long enough to seat 20. Imported porcelain. Silver cutlery aligned with military precision. Fresh peonies arranged in towering vases. Everything was flawless. Everything, except the marriage. At the head of the table sat Kang Minute. His presence alone shifted the air. Dark tailored suit. Impeccable posture. Expression carved from marble. The kind of man who didn't need to raise his voice to command obedience. Conversations paused when he lifted his glass. Eyes lowered when he spoke. Men feared him. Women admired him. The family relied on him. And beside him sat his wife. She wore soft ivory silk. No diamonds. No loud statement jewelry. Just a thin wedding band that caught the light when she moved. If Minute was winter, she was early spring. Quiet. Gentle. Almost too gentle for a room like this. She had arrived 30 minutes early to help the staff. Adjusted the table settings herself. Checked the kitchen twice. Prepared herbal tea for his father's blood pressure. Memoized everyone's dietary preferences. Because that was her role. The perfect wife. Supportive. Graceful. Unseen. Minute, you've lost weight, his mother observed from across the table. You work too much. He gave a polite nod. I'm fine. His wife glanced at him instinctively. She knew he hadn't been sleeping. She heard him pacing at 3 a.m. She had once walked toward his study to ask if he wanted tea. But stopped at the door. Because he never invited her inside that room. The conversation moved quickly around her. Business deals. Political favors. New territory acquisitions. Names she pretended not to recognize. When a cousin asked Minute about a recent expansion, he spoke calmly, confidently, every word measured. She watched him the way someone watches a distant star. Beautiful. Brilliant. Untouchable. A server approached to refill his glass. Before the man could reach forward, she gently stood. I'll do it. Her voice was soft but steady. She poured his drink with practiced elegance, careful not to spill a single drop. Minute didn't look at her. Didn't thank her. Didn't even pause mid-sentence. The room noticed. Her mother-in-law's lips curved almost imperceptibly. A cousin exchanged a glance with another. Pity. Amusement. She returned to her seat smoothly, pretending she felt nothing. She had perfected that too. Under the table, she gathered the courage she had been rehearsing all morning. Slowly, carefully. She reached for his hand. Just a touch. Just reassurance. Just something to tell her she still belonged beside him. Her fingertips brushed the back of his knuckles. For a second, she thought he might hold on. Instead, he shifted. Pulled his hand away to check his phone. The movement was subtle. Effortless. But it felt like a door closing. Her hand remained in midair for a fraction too long before she lowered it into her lap. Smile intact. Back straight. Breathing steady. No one would see the crack forming inside her. Across the table, laughter erupted. A joke about powerful men needing equally powerful wives. Another cousin added lightly, or at least wives who can keep up. More laughter. She smiled again. Because what else could she do? She had married into a dynasty. Into a family that valued influence over intimacy. Strength over softness. And she had told herself. If she loved him quietly enough. If she stood by him loyally enough. If she became everything they expected. One day, he might look at her not as an obligation, but as a choice. At the head of the table, Minute lifted his glass. Everyone followed. To family, someone toasted. Crystal clinked. Voices overlapped. But the space between husband and wife felt colder than the marble floors beneath them. And as the afternoon sun shifted behind the tall windows, casting long shadows across the table, she finally understood something she had been refusing to admit. You can sit beside a man, carry his name, wear his ring, share his house, and still feel completely alone. Hi, beautiful souls. Welcome to Velvet Story of Us, where every love story is filled with passion, emotion, and unforgettable moments. If you believe in romance that makes your heart race and stories that stay with you long after they end, you're in the right place. So sit back, enjoy the journey, and don't forget to watch, like, and subscribe to become part of our love story. Welcome to Velvet Story of Us. She noticed her before anyone said her name.
Sua didn't try to steal attention. She didn't need to.
She wore confidence the way other women wore perfume. Subtle, but impossible to ignore.
Midnight blue dress. Structured. Expensive.
The kind of fabric that didn't wrinkle, didn't fold, much like her posture.
She sat 3 seats away from Minute J. Close enough to lean in when she laughed.
Close enough for his mother to keep glancing between them.
Too close.
My dear Sua, Minute J's mother said warmly, placing her hand over the young woman's fingers. You've become even more beautiful.
Sua smiled gracefully. You flatter me, Auntie. Auntie. Not Mrs. Kang. Not Madam. Familiar. Intimate. Earned. Minute J's wife felt something tighten in her chest. She had been married into this family for 3 years. And she still addressed them formally. Still waited to be spoken to. Still felt like a guest. Conversation turned sharper. More deliberate. More pointed.
Your foundation's expansion into international markets is impressive, one uncle noted.
Sua nodded.
We believe influence should cross borders.
Minute J finally spoke.
It's strategic.
One word.
But it was the first time he had contributed outside of business logistics.
And it was directed at Sua. His wife's pulse faltered.
He hadn't commented on her cooking when she learned his favorite dishes.
Hadn't praised her when she hosted his associates flawlessly.
Hadn't acknowledged the way she memoized the birthdays of every single family member. But he acknowledged Suah's strategy.
Minute J's mother leaned back in her chair thoughtfully.
You know, she began, eyes glinting. When Minute J was younger, we used to joke that he would marry someone like you.
A beat of silence. Then soft laughter.
His wife's fingers curled around her napkin beneath the table. Someone added casually, a power couple would have been unstoppable. Another voice chimed in, politics and influence, the perfect balance. The air grew heavier. And still,
Minute J said nothing. His wife waited. For correction. For discomfort. For even a subtle clearing of his throat. Instead, he took a slow sip of wine. Composed. Unbothered. As if they were discussing stock prices. Not his marriage. Not the woman sitting beside him. Sua tilted her head slightly.
Her smile never faltered, but there was calculation in her eyes.
Oh, that was a long time ago, she said lightly.
Life takes unexpected paths.
Graceful. Polished. Dangerous. Because she didn't deny it. She didn't reject the idea. She simply left it possible. The wife forced a small laugh.
I suppose everything happens for a reason, she added softly. It was the first time she had spoken in nearly 15 minutes.
No one responded.
The conversation moved past her like water flowing around a stone.
Invisible resistance.
Under the table, her heel pressed into the marble floor.
Ground yourself. Breathe. Smile. You are the wife. You belong here.
But belonging felt different from being wanted. And for the first time since marrying Minute J, she wondered something she had been too afraid to ask herself before. If this family had been given the choice, would she have ever been chosen? Across the table, Sua leaned closer to Minute J to show him something on her phone.
Their shoulders almost touched. He bent slightly to look. Not intimate.
Not inappropriate.
But easy. Natural.
Effortless. The kind of body language that comes from familiarity. The wife stared at the small gap between them. That space looked smaller than the one between her and her own husband. A cousin whispered, not quietly enough. She would look better sitting at his side.
A fork clinked too loudly against porcelain. Silence flickered for half a second. Then laughter resumed. The wife's throat burned. She lowered her gaze so no one would see the shine forming in her eyes. Because tears here would not be sympathy. They would be weakness. And weakness in this family was remembered.
Minute J finally leaned back in his chair,
his arm resting casually along the backrest. But not behind his wife. Never behind his wife. He looked composed. Strategic. Unmoved. And that was what hurt the most. Not cruelty.
Not betrayal.
Just indifference.
Because indifference meant she wasn't worth defending. As dessert was served, his mother spoke again, voice light, but blade sharp. Well, some matches are made for love. Her gaze slid briefly to the wife. And some are made for necessity. The words didn't need explanation. The wife's heart gave a slow, painful thud. Necessity. She had always known their marriage began as an arrangement. But hearing it spoken aloud, in front of everyone, felt like being reduced to paperwork.
Minute J stood suddenly. The movement commanded attention. For a breath, hope flickered inside her. Was he finally going to speak? Finally draw a line?
Instead, he said calmly, "I have a call to take."
And he walked out, leaving her at the table, alone, with the woman they would have preferred.
The door closed softly behind him.
But the echo lingered. And for the first time, she didn't feel like the perfect wife. She felt like the placeholder. The doors closed behind Minute J. The echo lingered longer than it should have.
For a moment, the dining hall felt unbalanced, like the head of the table had lost its gravity. But the family recovered quickly. They always did. Powerful families never allowed silence to linger. Minute J's father dabbed his lips with a linen napkin.
Slowly, deliberately, the room quieted.
Even the servers paused near the walls. When he stood, no one continued eating. Because when he stood, decisions were about to be made. "There is something important," he began. His voice was calm, but it carried authority that had built empires. "Our family business is entering a new phase."
Eyes sharpened.
Spines straightened. The wife folded her hands in her lap. She had learned that announcements in this house were rarely small. "We will be merging with Assemblyman Park's foundation." The words landed like glass shattering in slow motion. A murmur spread around the table. Not confusion. Recognition.
Because this was more than business. This was alignment. Influence. Protection.
Expansion into political territory. And everyone at that table understood what that kind of merger traditionally required. The wife felt it before anyone said it. The shift. The glances. The almost smiles. All eyes slowly turned. Toward Suar. She did not react dramatically. Did not feign surprise. She simply lowered her gaze modestly. But the corner of her mouth curved just slightly. Controlled. Prepared. Minute J's mother spoke first. "Well," she said softly, "that would secure our future beautifully."
Secure.
The wife's pulse quickened.
Secure meant sacrifice. Secure meant negotiation. Secure meant marriages had clauses. Her throat went dry. She forced herself to speak.
Is this finalized?" It was the first question asked from her side of the table. Her father-in-law's gaze slid toward her. Not harsh. Not kind. Evaluating. "Details are being arranged." Her stomach tightened. Details. Such a small word for something that could dismantle a life. A cousin leaned forward eagerly. "This would unite two powerful families." Another added, "It would be historic." And then, the sentence she had been dreading. "Especially if the connection became official." Silence fell again. Thicker this time. Heavier. Because now it was no longer implied. It was spoken. Her fingers trembled under the table. Official. The word echoed like a verdict. She looked toward the empty doorway where her husband had disappeared. Why wasn't he here? Why hadn't he warned her? Why did she feel like the only person in the room who didn't know this was coming? Minute J's mother sighed softly. "It is unfortunate that some unions are limited in benefit." Her gaze settled openly on the wife now. Polite. But piercing. "You've been dutiful." Dutiful. The word felt like a knife wrapped in silk. Dutiful meant obedient. Quiet. Replaceable. The wife's chest tightened. 3 years of loyalty. 3 years of defending him in rooms where he wasn't present. 3 years of learning how to navigate a family that never fully embraced her. And this was how they spoke of her. Like an employee nearing the end of a contract. Suar finally spoke, voice gentle. "I would never wish to cause discomfort." But she did not refuse. Did not deny possibility. Did not say, "He is married." The absence of those words screamed louder than anything else. The wife felt something inside her shift. Not anger. Not yet. But realization. She had thought neglect was the worst pain. But there was something more devastating than being ignored. Being discussed. Like an obstacle. Like logistics. Like a minor inconvenience in a larger strategy. The father continued. "The formal proposal will be discussed privately with Minute J." Her ears rang. Formal proposal. Not hypothetical. Not suggestion. Formal. Meaning it had already moved beyond conversation. Meaning she had been sitting at this table while her marriage was being evaluated like an outdated agreement. She inhaled slowly. "You're speaking as if..." Her voice faltered, but she steadied it. "As if this marriage is negotiable." The entire table went still. Because she never pushed back.
Never raised questions. Never disrupted harmony.
Minute J's mother's expression cooled slightly. In families like ours, she said evenly, everything is negotiable. The words were not cruel.
They were factual. And that made them worse. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Minute J returned. Composed. Unreadable. He resumed his seat at the head of the table as if nothing had shifted.
As if the ground beneath his wife hadn't just cracked.
His father looked at him directly.
You've heard the direction we're taking.
It wasn't a question. Minute J's jaw tightened slightly.
A flicker.
Small. But she saw it. Because she watched him more closely than anyone else ever did. I'm aware, he replied calmly. Aware. The word struck her harder than anything else. He knew. He knew this was coming. And he had said nothing to her.
She turned toward him fully now.
Waiting. Begging silently. Say something. Correct them. Stop this. Choose me. But he remained still. Strategic. Measured. Silent. And in that silence, something inside her heart quietly fractured.
Because she realized this wasn't just a family decision. It was his.
Whether spoken or not. If he wanted it stopped, it would stop. And he wasn't stopping it.
The chandelier light reflected off polished marble.
Crystal glasses. Gold cutlery.
Everything looked pristine. But beneath the table,
her hands were shaking.
And for the first time since marrying Kang Minute J, she felt the terrifying possibility that she was not standing beside her husband.
She was standing in the way.
Minute J did not return to the dining hall immediately after the announcement.
He stepped into his private study instead. Closed the door. Locked it.
For the first time that afternoon, his composure slipped.
His hand braced against the edge of the desk. Jaw tight.
Breathing controlled, but heavier than usual. On the desk lay a folder.
Thick. Sealed.
Stamped with documents that could destroy Assemblyman Park's foundation overnight.
Financial laundering.
Bribery trails.
Illicit offshore accounts. The merger his father had proudly announced was built on corruption. And Minute J knew it.
Because he had been investigating it quietly for months.
He hadn't told his family. Hadn't told his father. And he certainly hadn't told his wife. Not because he didn't trust her.
But because he didn't trust the danger that followed him.
The less she knew, the safer she was. That had always been his logic. Distance equals protection. Coldness equals safety. Silence equals control. He replayed the scene in the dining hall.
The comments.
The glances.
The way they had spoken about replacing her as if she were a misplaced contract. His fingers curled into a fist.
He had seen it. Every word.
Every subtle insult. He had noticed the way her hand trembled under the table.
He had noticed when she reached for him. He had felt it. And he had still pulled away. Not because he didn't want her touch. But because if he let himself want it, he would choose her over strategy. Over caution. Over the empire he had spent years building. And powerful men were not allowed that weakness. He walked to the window. The city stretched below like a chessboard. Every district. Every building. Every alliance. A move. A countermove. He had mastered that game long ago. But love. Love was not predictable. Love made you reckless. And he had sworn never to be reckless again. His phone vibrated. A secure line. He answered without greeting.
Everything is in place, his right-hand man reported.
The evidence is airtight.
Once released, Park will fall within 48 hours.
Minute J's voice was steady. Not yet. A pause. Sir.
I want confirmation that no collateral damage reaches this house.
Collateral damage. He meant her. He didn't say her name. He rarely did. But everyone who worked closest to him understood. His wife was the only thing he never discussed publicly. The only subject he kept off limits.
Sir, the voice continued carefully, there's chatter.
Park is desperate.
If he suspects exposure, he may act irrationally.
I'm counting on it. Silence. Minute J's gaze darkened.
Because desperate men made mistakes.
And mistakes created openings.
He intended to let Park believe the merger was progressing. Let him grow comfortable. Let him think he had secured protection.
And then destroy him completely. Publicly. Irreversibly. But timing was everything. If he exposed Park too early, his father would see it as insubordination. If he delayed too long, the formal proposal might advance. And she, his wife, would suffer through more humiliation. The thought irritated him more than it should have. He told himself it was because optics mattered, because a fractured marriage weakened perception, because stability was necessary.
He did not allow himself to admit the deeper truth. The idea of her being replaced unsettled him in a way no rival ever had.
A memory surfaced. 3 months ago. Late night. He had returned home past midnight. Expected lights off. Silence. Instead, he found her asleep on the couch.
A blanket draped over her shoulders. A cup of tea on the table beside her, cold.
She had waited. Again.
When he approached, she stirred. Smiled softly. "You're home."
No accusations. No questions. Just relief. That kind of devotion was rare.
And rare things were dangerous.
Because once you realized their value, you feared losing them. There was a soft knock at his study door. He straightened instantly. Composure restored. Yes. The door opened slightly. It was her. She stood there quietly, hands clasped together,
eyes searching his face.
For answers. For reassurance. For something. He masked his expression immediately.
"What is it?"
Her throat moved as she swallowed.
"They are discussing the proposal."
"I know." The word was clipped. Measured. She hesitated.
"Is it true?"
He met her eyes then. Really looked at her.
And for a fraction of a second,
his resolve wavered. He could tell her everything.
Show her the file.
Explain the plan.
Tell her she was never in danger of being replaced. That he would never trade her for politics. But vulnerability required trust. And trust required exposure. And exposure created risk. "It's complicated," he said instead. The worst possible answer. Because complicated feels like rejection.
Feels like distance. Feels like you're standing outside a locked door.
Her eyes dimmed slightly.
"Oh."
That single syllable carried more hurt than shouting ever could.
"I will handle it," he added. Business tone. Final. Dismissive without meaning to be. She nodded slowly. Of course she did. She always did. All right. She turned to leave. And something inside him tightened painfully. Say it. Stop her. Explain. Choose her. But pride. And habit. And fear. Kept him silent. The door closed softly behind her. Minajay exhaled slowly. He walked back to his desk.
Opened the folder again. Stared at the evidence that could end a political dynasty.
He had planned this carefully. Strategically. Coldly. What he hadn't planned was that the greatest threat to his control
would be the possibility of losing the one person who never asked for power.
Only for him. And he still didn't realize
that by trying to protect her from the storm,
he had already left her standing in the rain alone.
The argument began quietly.
Too quietly.
Minajay had just returned to the dining hall when the atmosphere shifted again.
Assemblyman Park stood near the entrance. Uninvited.
Unannounced.
And visibly shaken.
His usually polished appearance was unraveling, tie loosened, forehead damp, eyes sharp with something unstable. Desperation. The room stiffened instantly.
Guards stepped forward. Minajay raised a hand slightly. They stopped.
Because he understood something immediately.
Park knew.
"You think I'm a fool?"
Park's voice cracked through the hall.
No greetings.
No formalities.
His gaze locked onto Minajay like a man already cornered. "You investigate me while pretending to negotiate." A ripple of shock spread across the table.
Minajay's father stood abruptly.
"What is the meaning of this?"
But Park didn't look at him. He looked only at Minajay.
"You are going to expose me."
Not a question.
A confirmation. The wife felt her pulse spike. Expose? Investigate? Her eyes flew to her husband.
And in that split second, she understood. He had known all along. This merger was never real. It was bait. Minajay stepped forward calmly. Controlled. Even now.
"You built your empire on fraud," he said evenly. "Did you expect it to stand forever?"
Gasps. Sua went pale.
She looked at her father, then at Minajay, betrayal and panic warring in her expression. "You promised protection," Park snapped. "I promised nothing," Minajay replied. Cold. Final. The wife's heart pounded violently. Everything made sense now. The silence. The tension. The secrecy. He had never planned to replace her. He had been planning to destroy them. And he hadn't told her. Because he thought he was protecting her. The realization hit her all at once. He had chosen her.
but in the worst possible way, by pushing her away to keep her safe. Park's breathing grew erratic. "You think you win?" he hissed.
You think you can humiliate my family and walk away?
Guards moved subtly closer. Minute J remained steady. "This ends here."
It ends, Park said darkly, when you feel what I feel.
His hand slipped inside his coat. Time slowed.
The wife saw it before anyone else did. The tension in his shoulder.
The flicker of metal.
The shift in the guard's posture. Her body reacted before her mind caught up. Minute J. The gunshot shattered the room.
Crystal exploded. Screams pierced the air. But Minute J did not fall. She did. She had moved without thinking. Thrown herself between him and the weapon. Her body colliding with his just as the shot rang out. For a second, he didn't understand what had happened.
Then warmth spread across his hands.
Too warm. Too thick. He looked down. Red. Blooming across ivory silk. The room dissolved into chaos. Guards tackled Park.
Another shot fired into the ceiling. Someone screamed Suah's name.
But Minute J heard none of it. All he saw was her. Her knees buckling.
Her breath hitching.
Her fingers clutching weakly at his jacket. He caught her before she hit the marble floor. No. The word tore from his throat. Raw.
Uncontrolled. A sound no one in that room had ever heard from him. Her blood soaked through his suit.
Through his shirt. Through his composure. "Stay with me," he demanded. It wasn't a request. It was an order. As if he could command life itself. Her lips trembled. She tried to speak. It hurt.
Everything hurt.
But she forced the words out.
"I didn't want you to be alone." The simplicity of it destroyed him.
Not strategy.
Not politics.
Not pride. She thought he would be alone. And even after everything, she chose him. Without hesitation. Without guarantee. Without protection. His forehead pressed against hers. "You foolish woman," he whispered hoarsely. But his hands were shaking.
The great Kang Minute J.
The man who dismantled empires. Was trembling.
"Why would you do that?" Her eyelids fluttered weakly. "Because
I'm your wife. Not for power. Not for duty.
Not for arrangement.
For him." Sirens wailed in the distance. Guards shouted orders. Park was dragged away screaming. But none of it mattered.
Minute J lifted her into his arms.
Blood dripping onto the marble.
Onto the table that had hosted her humiliation.
Onto the space where she had sat invisible. Now,
there was nothing invisible about her sacrifice. As he carried her out, his mother stood frozen.
Speechless. For the first time in years, the powerful matriarch had no words.
Because the woman they had called necessary
had just taken a bullet meant for the air. In the ambulance, Minute J refused to let go. Doctors tried to move him. He didn't budge.
"You can't die," he said quietly, dangerously. "Do you hear me?"
Her breathing was shallow. Her skin pale. And for the first time since childhood,
Minute J felt something he had sworn never to feel again.
Fear. Not fear of losing power. Not fear of enemies. Fear of losing her. Because in that moment, he realized something with brutal clarity. He had spent years keeping her at a distance to protect her from his world. And she had crossed that distance in a single heartbeat. To protect him from it. Hospitals smell nothing like power. No polished marble. No crystal chandeliers. No whispers of influence. Just antiseptic. Fluorescent lights. And the sound of machines deciding whether someone gets another heartbeat. Minute J had faced gunfire before. Betrayals. Assassination attempts. Negotiations where one wrong word meant war. None of it prepared him for this hallway.
The doctors rushed her past him the moment they arrived. Internal bleeding. Bullet lodged near the rib. Prep for surgery.
The words blurred. He stood there, hands still stained red. Someone tried to guide him to a chair. He didn't move.
Not until the operating room doors shut.
Then the silence hit. His right-hand man approached carefully. "Sir, Park has been detained." No reaction.
"The evidence will go public tonight. His entire foundation will collapse."
Still nothing. Because none of it mattered. Not now. Not if she didn't survive. Minute J sat slowly.
Elbows on knees.
Hands clasped together. Blood dried against his skin. He stared at it. Her blood. And for the first time in years, his control fractured. He replayed every moment.
Every lunch. Every night he returned late. Every time she waited for him in silence. Every time she reached for his hand.
Every time he pulled away. He thought distance would protect her.
Instead,
it almost cost her life. 3 hours passed. Then 4. The clock on the wall ticked too loudly. His mother arrived. Face pale.
Eyes red.
She stood a few steps away. Uncertain. Kang Minute, she said softly. He didn't look up.
She saved you.
It wasn't accusation. It wasn't praise. It was truth. He swallowed hard. I know. His voice was rough. Unrecognizable.
Another memory surfaced.
The day they married.
She had bowed respectfully to his parents.
Promise steady. Hands trembling only slightly.
Later that night, she had asked him one thing. Even if you don't love me now, can you at least not shut me out?
He had said nothing. Just nodded once. He had broken even that small promise.
The surgery light finally turned off.
A doctor stepped out. Mask lowered. She's alive.
The air rushed back into his lungs so violently it hurt. But the next 24 hours are critical.
Critical. He nodded once. Calm on the outside. Shattered within.
When they allowed him into her room, the world narrowed to a single hospital bed.
She looked smaller somehow. Fragile. Bandaged. Machines tracing fragile lines of life beside her. He approached slowly.
As if sudden movement might make her disappear.
He pulled a chair closer. Sat down.
And for the first time since their wedding, he reached for her hand first.
It was warm. But weak. He wrapped both of his hands around it.
As if anchoring her to this world. You're reckless, he whispered.
But his voice broke halfway through.
You don't get to decide when to leave me.
Silence.
Only the steady beep of a monitor.
He lowered his head. Forehead resting gently against their joined hands.
I thought pushing you away would keep you safe.
A pause. Long. Heavy.
I was wrong. The word tasted foreign.
Minute did not say that word easily. But here, in this quiet room, he had no power. No leverage. No strategy. Just regret. I saw you, he continued quietly.
Every time they spoke about replacing you.
His jaw tightened.
I should have ended it then.
He exhaled slowly.
I will never let anyone speak about you like that again.
The promise wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Men like him didn't make empty vows. Her fingers twitched. Just slightly. His head snapped up instantly. He stood halfway.
Doctor. But then, her eyes fluttered open.
Weak. Blurry. Searching. And when they found him, they softened.
Relief.
Even now.
Relief. You're still here, she murmured faintly. The words sliced straight through him.
He almost laughed at the irony.
I'm not going anywhere.
He sat back down.
Carefully brushing hair away from her forehead.
You nearly died. She tried to smile.
But I didn't.
Brave. Even now. Why? He asked again. This time not demanding. Not angry.
Just needing to understand.
She swallowed painfully.
Because I thought you didn't need me.
A tear escaped before she could stop it.
But I needed you.
That was the truth.
Not political alliance.
Not strategy. Not pride. Need. Something inside Minute collapsed completely.
He had spent years convincing himself he could survive without attachment.
Without vulnerability. Without love. But watching her choose him. Hearing her admit she needed him.
Made something painfully clear.
He needed her more. He leaned closer. Voice low. Steady. For the first time in my life.
I was afraid.
Her eyes widened slightly.
You? A faint breath of disbelief. Yes.
No hesitation.
No enemy has ever frightened me. His thumb brushed gently across her knuckles. But losing you did.
The room fell quiet again. But this silence was different. Not cold. Not distant. Not neglectful. It was shared.
Outside the hospital room,
his empire was shifting.
Arrests were being made.
Political alliances collapsing. News channels buzzing with scandal. But inside that room, none of it mattered. Because the most powerful man in the city had just realized. Power means nothing.
If the person who loves you most has to bleed to prove it.
By morning, the world had changed. Not because of headlines. Not because of arrests.
but because Kang Min-jae no longer cared about maintaining appearances.
He cared about one thing, and she was breathing because of a miracle.
At 6 a.m., his legal team released the evidence. Every document, every offshore transfer, every falsified charitable report. Within hours, Assemblyman Park's foundation collapsed publicly. News anchors dissected it live. Political allies distanced themselves. Bank accounts were frozen. Assets seized. By noon, arrest warrants had been issued. By evening, Park was no longer powerful. He was a defendant. And Min-jae had not raised his voice once. He didn't need to. But this wasn't about politics anymore. This was personal. He entered the family estate that night alone. No security trailing behind him. No entourage. Just controlled fury wrapped in a tailored black suit. The dining hall was empty. But the same long table remained. The same seats. The same chandelier that had glittered above his wife's humiliation. He stopped at the head of the table. And waited. Because he had summoned them. One by one, they arrived. His father. His mother. Uncles. Cousins. Even Sua, pale, silent, her reputation now tied to scandals she claimed ignorance of. No one spoke. Because the heir felt different. He wasn't here as the obedient heir. He wasn't here as the strategic negotiator. He was here as a husband. Min-jae remained standing. You spoke about replacing my wife. No greeting. No softness. His voice was calm, but lethal. No one moved. His mother attempted composure. We were discussing what was best for the family. He turned toward her slowly. My wife is what is best for this family. The statement was not emotional. It was decisive. Final. His father frowned slightly. You are letting sentiment interfere with logic. Min-jae's gaze hardened. No. A beat. I am correcting a mistake. Silence stretched across the room. While you were negotiating alliances, he continued, she was protecting this family in ways none of you saw. He stepped forward. She learned every name. Every preference. Every weakness at this table. His voice sharpened. And when danger entered this house. He paused. Because even now, remembering the blood on marble made something dark flicker in his eyes. She moved before any of you did. No one dared interrupt him. Sua lowered her gaze. This was never my intention, she said quietly. Min-jae looked at her briefly. This was never your place. Not cruel, but unmistakably clear. Whatever political fantasy had been entertained was now over. Irreversible. His mother finally spoke again. You cannot dismantle decades of strategy for a woman. Min-jae's expression didn't change. I dismantled it because it endangered her. A dangerous quiet settled. Because they all understood what that meant. He had chosen. Not the empire. Not the alliance. He moved to the center of the table. Placed both hands against the polished wood. This family will never speak of replacing her again. His gaze swept across each face. If anyone at this table believes she is weak. A pause. Cold. Measured. Test that theory. No one did. His father studied him carefully. You've changed. Min-jae straightened. No. His voice was steady. I've clarified. Later that evening, he returned to the hospital. The corridors were quiet. Dim lights. Soft footsteps. He entered her room without a sound. She was awake. Propped slightly against pillows. Still pale. But stronger than yesterday. She looked at him uncertainly. As if afraid something had shifted permanently. It had. But not the way she feared. He pulled a chair beside her bed. Didn't stand at a distance. Didn't check his phone. Didn't glance at emails. He simply sat there. I ended it, he said. Her brows furrowed slightly. The merger. The alliance. All of it. Her lips parted faintly. For me? He held her gaze. Yes. No hesitation. No strategy behind it. Just truth. She searched his face. As if trying to determine whether this was guilt speaking. Or obligation. Or something else. You didn't have to. I did. He leaned forward slightly. Because I realized something in that hallway. His voice lowered. I can rebuild influence. I can regain territory. I can recover assets. His eyes locked onto hers. But I cannot replace you. The words settled between them. Heavy. Honest. Unpolished.
A tear slipped down her cheek. This time, not from heartbreak, but from relief. He reached up, wiped it away gently. No hesitation. No pulling back.
I was wrong, he admitted quietly. I thought protecting you meant keeping you outside my world. His thumb brushed lightly against her wrist. But you are already in it. Outside the hospital window, the city continued moving.
Cars. Lights. Power structures shifting. But inside that room, the most powerful decision had already been made. He had chosen love. Not because it was soft. Not because it was easy. But because losing her had shown him something brutal and undeniable. Strength without devotion is empty.
And the man who once ruled through fear was now learning how to lead with loyalty. 3 months later,
the mansion stood exactly as it had before.
White stone.
Tall windows.
The same long dining table polished to perfection.
From the outside, nothing had changed. Inside, everything had.
She hesitated at the entrance of the dining hall. The last time she walked into this room, she left in his arms, bleeding.
The memory still flickered in the back of her mind. But today, she wasn't fragile. She wasn't uncertain. She wasn't invisible. And she wasn't alone.
Minute J stood beside her.
Not ahead of her. Not walking several steps in front as he once did. Beside her.
His hand rested firmly at the small of her back.
Protective. Present. Intentional.
When they entered together, conversation quieted instantly. Every pair of eyes turned toward them. The difference was immediate. Before, she had walked in softly, blending into the background. Today, she walked in with his hand holding hers openly. Not hidden under the table. Not subtle. Unmistakable.
They took their seats. But something else was different. He did not sit at the head of the table. Instead, he pulled her chair out first, waited until she was seated comfortably, then took the seat beside her.
The symbolic shift did not go unnoticed. The heir of the family had moved his position, and in doing so, shifted the power in the room.
His mother began speaking first. Polite. Controlled.
We're pleased to see you've recovered.
It was formal, but softer than before. She inclined her head respectfully.
Thank you.
No bitterness. No resentment. Just grace. That grace unsettled them more than anger ever could have. Lunch began. Conversations flowed cautiously. And then, a cousin made the mistake. Light tone. Careless.
At least the political distraction is over. Now we can focus on more advantageous connections.
The words hovered in the air. Not direct, but deliberate. Minute J set his glass down gently. The faint sound of crystal against wood echoed. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't glare. He simply spoke.
My wife is the only connection this family requires.
Silence fell instantly. No laughter followed. No one dared. He turned slightly toward her. Not dramatically. Not theatrically.
Just enough for the entire table to see his profile soften. She carries my name, he continued calmly. And more importantly, she carries my loyalty.
The word landed heavier than any threat ever could. Because loyalty, from him, was sacred.
Irreversible.
His father stuttered him.
You are certain this is the path you want?
Minute J didn't break eye contact with his wife. Yes. No pause. No calculation.
Yes. The certainty in his voice ended the discussion permanently. Under the table, her fingers trembled slightly. Not from fear, but from the unfamiliar feeling of being defended openly. He noticed. Of course he noticed. This time, when he reached for her hand.
She didn't have to initiate it. He did.
And he held it above the table, where everyone could see,
where no one could pretend it didn't exist.
I misjudged her, his mother admitted slowly.
It was not a full apology, but it was the closest she had ever come.
She protected this family.
She met her daughter-in-law's eyes.
And that will not be forgotten. The acknowledgement shifted something final in the room.
Respect. Earned not through politics, not through wealth, but through sacrifice. Minute J leaned slightly closer to his wife. His voice low enough for only her to hear.
I should have done this long ago.
Her eyes glistened.
You're doing it now.
He exhaled softly.
Relief. Because for months he had feared the distance he created had done permanent damage.
But she was still here. Still choosing him. Not because of fear.
Not because of obligation.
But because she loved him. As dessert was served, the atmosphere no longer felt hostile. No more whispered comparisons. No more strategic glances toward other women. Just acceptance. Measured. Earned. Real.
Later, as the family began to disperse, Minute J stood. He addressed the table one final time. There will be no further discussion of alliances involving my marriage.
His tone was steady.
If influence is required,
a subtle edge entered his voice.
I will secure it myself.
The message was clear. She would never again be used as currency.
Never again be discussed as negotiable. Never again be made to feel temporary. Outside, as they stepped into the late afternoon light, she paused.
The same courtyard. The same path where ambulances once rushed. She turned to him quietly.
You didn't have to confront them like that.
He looked down at her. Serious. Certain.
I almost lost you because I waited too long to speak.
His hand gently brushed against her cheek. I won't make that mistake twice. For the first time since their marriage, there was no distance between them. No unspoken wall. No strategic silence. Only understanding. Only choice.
Only love, no longer hidden behind pride. And somewhere in the city, people still whispered about Kang Minute-J.
About how ruthless he was. How calculated. How untouchable. They weren't wrong. But they didn't know this. The only person who had ever disarmed him was the woman who once sat beside him, feeling invisible. And now, she no longer had to wonder if she was chosen. Because this time, he chose her loudly.